Hello and welcome back to another episode of Hollywood Wargaming. My voice is a bit shot for this one, so please do bear with my croakiness. But we recently and finally had plastic Italians announced for bolt action from Warlord Games. Obviously, Italian infantry has been present in the rules of the game, and we did have metal Italians for quite some time. But Warlord has finally given us our first preview of this new Italian Army in Black Shirts plastic box set, along with some high-res photos of the sprue. But as you can probably see on the screen here, another company did actually beat Warlord to the punchline of making plastic Italians. And that would be a relatively new company known as Wargames Atlantic, who have lately been putting out a lot of plastic box sets and have a very wide diversity of products, including things like World War I, World War II, fantasy armies akin to old Warhammer, antiquity, and even what seems to be an entire subsection of Imperial Guard proxy units. And the people behind this company definitely seem like they can identify market demands that larger companies are failing to see or meet, because they do have some very cool plastic kits in their line that either triggers a lot of nostalgia for things like 90s Warhammer, and units that are kind of just gaps in other companies' product lines, such as plastic partisans and Italians. So they are definitely worth checking out if you haven't heard of them before. But before we dive into these box sets and take a look at their sprues, I'm going to go off on a bit of a tangent on Warlord Games here, which is something that I don't want to do because I do respect Warlord Games, and I really like that they are kind of the polar opposite of Games Workshop, where they're definitely a company that is making the products they want to make rather than chasing the dollar and make what sells. But they seem to have a major blind spot when it comes to customer demands, as people have been asking for plastic Italians for years now, along with many other updates to other kits, notably the Russian infantry. And for a much smaller and newer company to beat them to a punchline like this is kind of embarrassing in my opinion, especially if you take a look at where Warlord's time and resources have been dumped into lately. I'm sure the new Civil War stuff is selling fine and it looks great, but seeing months and months of releases for things like Judge Dredd and Mythic Americas, with sculpts that, regrettably to say, look like they're regressing in quality, does have me shaking my head a bit overall, as bolt action really is their flagship game, and it seems to be getting less attention than all their other product lines. So it's no surprise that other companies like Wargames Atlantic are going to come in and eat their lunch. But with that rant out of the way, on a brighter note, these new Italians from Warlord Games do look quite nice, so let's go ahead and take a look at what's coming. And first up here, we do have a new rendering of the box itself with some nice artwork on it, along with 6 assembled minis beneath there, who are going to be showing off not only some different weapon options here, but also some different head options that have various hats. And I gotta say, I really like Warlord's new attention to detail with the various headgear option these kits are now coming with. It brings a lot of variety to the table, and as someone who already does have a lot of metal Italians, it does kind of incentivize me to pick up this box and make some black shirts. And that is another interesting point about this box set. It is the Italian Army and Black Shirts box, and while Warlord did their best to get the most universal Italian uniform design when sculpting these models, they do seem to lean pretty heavy into the black shirt aesthetic, definitely more so than their previous metal kits. Also, it is worth mentioning that there is no Bersaglieri options in this box set, something that I'm sure some people may be upset about, as they are extremely popular amongst the Italian fanboys for good reasons, and also extremely prevalent in things like the Western Desert campaign book. So if you do want Bersaglieri, you are going to have to either go with Warlord's metal line, or perhaps take a look at Wargames Atlantic. Personally, I'm fine with that, as most of my metal Italians are Bersaglieri, and I'm sure for a lot of other players out there who previously bought the metal box sets, they are on the same boat with me, and that makes this box set, which does represent a different sect of the Italian military, a much more appealing sell. And if this was a box set that was Italian Army in Bersaglieri instead of Italian Army in Black Shirts, I probably wouldn't be interested in picking one up, but Black Shirts are a unit that I don't have in my Italian collection right now. And I think that does save this box set from being something that on release, most players simply say, I already have it, be it from Wargames Atlantic or the previous Metal Warlord models. But with this box set, we are also getting a new campaign book, which is of course Italy, the Soft Underbelly, which is very obviously going to have to do with the invasion of Italy by the Allies. And for my more historically inclined listeners, please fill me in on the naming convention behind this book. Is it referencing a quote or just being ironic? Because as history shows, Italy was not the HOV lane into Germany that some thought it would be. But a new campaign book very much is a welcoming addition, especially to those quote-unquote minor factions like Italy, who always get more interesting rules than their standard armies of whenever campaign books are involved. On top of that, we are getting a limited release model, who is the General Enrico Francisi, aka the Fighting General. And I gotta say, I'm not crazy about the model itself, it's rather uninspired. But hey, a free officer goes a long way in stretching out a 30-man box set, so I really don't have too much right to complain there. But as I mentioned earlier, we did get a sprue revealed for us, so let's go ahead and take a look at said sprue. And starting off on the left side, we are going to have a solid variety of heads. Of course, we have enough to make the entire squad in the M33 Italian helmet, along with some Bustina hats, which I believe are wool caps with flip-down rims, followed up by pith helmets should you want to go that Western Desert route. But where things get really interesting, in my opinion, is with the options of fezzes, as we do have a hard and soft top fez, with the soft variant having that long flowing braid off of it, which are all honestly going to look really cool with the black shirt uniforms. And I am definitely going to have mine either wearing fezzes or the M33 helmets, which will give them some stark contrast to my Western Desert Italian force. But after that, we do have some cool new hands for officers and spotters and other support models of the like. We have the tiny Beretta pistol for your officers or sergeants. I really like the two-hand jotting down on the map. I think that's great for a spotter. And if you look on the lower right-hand side of the sprue, we even have the dude making the Italian hand. You know the one I'm talking about, which I think is going to become very memeable. And I do find it interesting that they went through the lengths to make sure that was in the kit. But it looks like we are going to have 3 carbines, 5 rifles, 2 LMGs, and 1 SMG, which I do find a little bit tight in the SMG department, but I'm not really sure if Italian infantry and black shirts have a lot of access to that anyways. I think the non-NCO SMG is more of a versatility thing, so overall 6 SMGs in the box may be enough. And overall, I do think the sprue has a pretty healthy mixture of arm options here, which really can make or break a kit. But lastly, we are going to have our bodies here, and thank God there's no prone positions. I personally don't hate the prone position as much as a lot of other people do. I think they do look very cool, but they also take up a lot of room on a sprue. And then you also have to include arms that aren't compatible with any of the other torsos. So overall, it is a plus in my opinion when I don't see them on a sprue, unless it's a faction that likes to use a lot of LMGs like Germany. But we are going to have a kneeling position, which is quite fine for things like spotters or riflemen, followed up by 2 bodies running, with another in a sort of lurching forward position, and 2 stationary, which is overall a pretty healthy mix. However, I do wish that one of him lurching forward was more stationary looking, as it does remind me a lot of this one set of legs from the old Imperial Guard Command Squad set, the one that I think was supposed to be the flag bearers, and that one did make for a lot of awkward poses. But hey, this is a completely different kit, so maybe it'll be just fine. It is also worth pointing out that 2 of these torsos are going to be wearing the Sahariana smocks, which I believe are just a desert yellow colored pullover smock, which won't require a whole lot of extra detail, no camouflage patterns or anything like that, but will help break up the monotony of a full squad. So overall, I am a pretty big fan of this sprue. It does have some good options here. I'm slightly concerned about the amount of SMGs being limited, but I don't think that's going to matter too much when you look at how you can run these units. But overall, the head options are probably what I am most excited about. Again, black shirts and fezzes are going to be pretty sweet. But let's go ahead and take a look at the new kid on the block, who is of course Wargames Atlantic, with their somewhat less new Italian infantry plastic box set. And here I do actually have a lineup of some of the painted models displayed on their websites. They do have photos of the sprue, but unlike Warlord Games, they face both directions, so it's a bit harder to decipher them, and they're overall just not as high quality res and image as the Warlord sprues. So if you want to check them out, go to their website. But I think these photos of the finished project do a better job of displaying what this new company has to offer in terms of their product line. And the first thing that is going to jump out at us here is the fact that these are much less heroic scale than the Warlord Games product line. And for those of you who aren't familiar with the term heroic scale, it usually means larger heads, hands, and weapons, just so they stand out better on the tabletop, and it is a style that has long since been a staple in wargaming, as different scale things do sort of trick your eyes from a distance. But these Wargames Atlantic models are definitely still heroic to a degree, and given sometimes Warlord models are even comically heroic, but these really do seem like a halfway point between Warlord Games and something like a Tamiya kit, as they definitely do have a more slender vibe to them overall, and that is something that can either be a major bonus to some people or a bit of a drawback, as is the case with me, seeing as I need to mesh these plastic models with my previously existing Warlord ones. And I think that alone may deter me a bit from picking up this box set. But if I didn't already have a bunch of metal models from Warlord, I would probably take this route. And aside from being a less expensive box, there is very good reasoning behind that. As I am a Western Desert player, all of my collections are North African themed, and this box set does come with plastic Bersaglieri, which have a very cool sprue mechanic where the feathers of the iconic Bersaglieri helmets are their own bit that can be glued on to the M33 or pith helmets, which is a very smart way to incorporate that flexibility into your sprue. Now, this box set is also going to give you the Italian Alpini hat for the Alpine troops, who were essentially the Italian Gebirgsjäger. So if you want to be a real hipster and start an Italian faction and go with a full Alpini battalion, this box set will accommodate you. However, this will be at a bit of a trade-off, as I believe there are no fezzes in this box set, which makes the Warlord box a bit more of your standard infantry and conscripted black shirts, while the Wargames Atlantic box is going to be more geared towards your elite infantry, again with Bersaglieri and Alpini, which, whether done intentionally or not, is a pretty cool dynamic that makes both of these boxes have their own selling point. But this Wargames Atlantic box set will also give you 2 command sprues, which give you enough to make 2 officers, and also 2 Beretta machine guns on tripods, which I will say is a bit of a drawback for bolt action considering that most squads do take an LMG in it. But as a trade-off, we are getting 2 SMGs per sprue, which again is going to be more relevant with those elite forces like the Bersaglieri. Now, I have never worked with Wargames Atlantic's models myself. I don't know the quality of this plastic, but I have heard good things about their products from people I trust, so I'm sure they will be quite manageable. So overall, this Wargames Atlantic box does seem quite impressive, and it has a great display with these beautiful crisp paint jobs on the website. So if you are just getting into Italians and bolt action, and you want to go with a more elite force without having to buy metal models, this is a route that I definitely would consider, though I probably wouldn't field these alongside other Warlord models, as they probably aren't going to mesh too well in terms of scale. Now, don't get me wrong, if your opponent is playing Warlord models and you're not, it's no big deal. I'm simply saying if you mix these models into the same squad, you will be able to tell which one came from where. And if that's something that doesn't bother you at all, don't let me hold you back. But let's go ahead and take a look at these 2 box sets side by side with each other and recap what they have to offer. Now, the new plastic box from Warlord is going to offer you 30 models at a price tag of around 50 USD. Yes, unfortunately, Warlord Games price hikes do have our plastic box sets sitting around that dollar point, but let's be real, inflation is happening, and 30 models is a pretty decent chunk of a bolt-action army, and the painting alone will keep you occupied for quite some time, because you are going to sit down and you will paint them. But this box set is of course going to give you the capability to build both black shirts and standard Italian infantry, and as far as unit construction goes, you are going to have an ample amount of light machine guns here, and while you may not have a ton of submachine guns to build, I think you are going to have enough, which again makes this box set a little bit more ideal for your standard core infantry units who will likely be run as regulars or perhaps even inexperienced with green, something that, as I mentioned earlier, is going to contrast with our next box here, which is of course the Wargames Atlantic plastic Italian infantry box, which will come in at a very affordable $35 and will give you enough torsos to build 32 models. So on face value, this does seem like the better buy than the Warlord Games box, and if you are on a budget, that is definitely something to consider. But keep in mind that neither of these prices factor in shipping. But when you consider Warlord Games' overseas shipping policies, I don't think it's going to tip the scales anymore in their favor. But of course, these box sets are 2 different products, and even though they are the same plastic Italians from the same war, we are getting a bit of variety between them. Again, Warlord is giving you that black shirt infantry box set, and this one is going to be giving you the option to make both Bersaglieri and Alpini on top of your standard infantry, which makes it a bit more of an elite force box set. And you fortunately are going to be getting more submachine guns in this box to accommodate that elite force role, though I will say only having 2 LMGs in the box set is a bit of a drawback, which likely won't be an issue if you buy 2 of these box sets or more, but if you just buy 1 and have those 2 LMGs, it is going to restrict your list building capabilities and probably pigeonhole you into building more aggressive lists to make use of those submachine guns. So overall, to cap things off, I would say that if I were just now getting into the Italian faction, I would certainly check out Wargame Atlantic's box set, but seeing as I already have a large amount of Bersaglieri, and my existing force is of Warlord's more heroic scale models, I will instead continue to flesh out my force by adding some black shirts in with this new Warlord plastic box set, though I highly doubt I'll be picking up more than 1 of them. But let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below. Do any of you guys have experience with the Wargame Atlantic products or the Italian box set in particular? If so, I would love to hear from you. And what do you guys think about this new Italian box set from Warlord? And as always, if you enjoyed the video, go ahead and leave a like. Consider subscribing to the channel, turning on notifications so you can see more videos. And as always, until next time, take care.